I'm glad you're here with us today. It was wonderful having you talk about evictions with our audience earlier. And so we wanted to have a little bit of a follow-up. You'd started talking a little bit about how evictions are, I believe the word you used was a catalyst for poverty. And I think that's a perspective that not everybody might be thinking about. And so I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit more about the relationships of evictions, also housing in general, in the process of poverty, because it's process, right?
Great question. And so as we talked about in the webinar, there's a great book out there from Matthew Desmond called Evicted. The way of thinking about things was that, eviction was just another symptom of poverty. But, in his book, he talks a lot about, no, actually it's a catalyst. Meaning to say, when somebody becomes evicted, it causes them to spiral even further into poverty. So, for example, for lower wage, middle-low income family, they have trouble paying the rent, they become evicted, they have to move somewhere else. They might be, with an eviction on their record, moving to some place where the housing isn't as great, the schools aren't as great. There might be more crime in the neighborhood. As people kind of get more desperate to find housing, their housing conditions become worse, and it further entrenches them in poverty.
Right. And subsequent generations as well, it sounds like, because if the children get disrupted in school, there's more tension at home, it might be more difficult for them to study.
Absolutely.
Can go on. Yeah.
So if you're spending your, hours during the day just looking for somebody who's going to accept you as renter, worrying about not only focusing on childcare, but also find another place to live. You're pulling your child from one school to another. All of those things we know put a lot of pressure on the adults in the family, but also the kids in the family too.
Yeah, certainly. So you brought to mind a couple of people I know that got evicted, and because of the suddenness of the needing to move. So you forget stuff, right? So a couple of times I've seen people they've lost important papers that they needed for proving who they were or for jobs. They lost a lot of things that could have been valuable to them. They had to start again to build up cooking utensils, that sort of thing too. I presume that sort of thing comes up a lot as well.
Well, not only that, but also talked about in his book the expenses behind, let's say you do keep your stuff and you put it into storage. Well, those costs and those expenses are also another burden for you. Right. Maybe you are trying to preserve that, and it becomes really hard to get ahead when you're constantly catching up after an eviction.
Right.
Even coming down to the application fees. Let's say you're trying to find a place to live, you got a million other things going on, you rushed with the application, you didn't check off every box. Well, you might have paid $35 to try and apply to get that place, but because you didn't check off the box, you don't get it. And there goes $35, and if you do that a couple times, well, that's tough because that's pulling out of your rent money.
Right. And the time it took to do all of that as well.
Absolutely.
And I presume you'd feel pretty deflated about here I am trying to get a new place to rent, and I'm just not finding a place. And perhaps I'm in a homeless shelter in the meantime, or living in my car, or couch surfing, and all of that takes a toll on people.
Absolutely. And in the book, Matthew Desmond kind of put it this way: eviction is to black women what incarceration is to black men. And if you can think of the stigma and the cycle of poverty that it generates, we're talking about deep-rooted systemic issues here. It's not just a matter of having an issue paying the rent one month, but it's a social issue that we really need to be thinking more about. Right,
definitely. There's a lot of systemic forces impacting this issue quite a bit.
Yeah.
Including the high cost of housing these days and limited availability of it, and issues all the way around the cycle, right?
Right, and if you take a working class family, if people can't work towards home ownership, they're not building their wealth. And if they're instead moving in the other direction to where they're losing resources on a daily basis, whether that's the furnishings for their home or what have you, it's very hard not only for them to keep treading water, but also to one day get ahead.
Right. So you keep falling a little bit further behind, a little further behind.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's turn the focus a little bit. What can we do to help people avoid that kind of a situation, or if they're in it, what can we do to help people start to stabilize and then grow out of that?
That's a great question. And it depends on who you're asking or you're telling to act, right?
Right.
So for our local municipalities who are trying to help families get ahead, maybe it's establishing a little bit of rental assistance. That can go a long way to help a family avoid eviction. Maybe if you're a case manager, it's finding those extra resources for the family to have a little bit more cash come into their pocket every month. So they're not teetering on the edge of eviction every month. Maybe that extra $200 will save them. If you are a tenant yourself and trying to avoid this issue, it's really about preparation and planning, and knowing if you do have a financial hardship, people will want to work with you. They will try and give you a shot. Maybe not every time.
Yeah.
But if you're honest and upfront about it and try and take action right away, you're going to have the best bet to escape that situation. And I think on a larger state and country level, it's going to be putting the necessary resources behind help, giving families the leg up. We hear, especially in Colorado, rents have gone through the roof, but wages have not. There's been a stagnation of wages, and that's also a systemic issue there too.
Right.
Is if the income's not keeping up with the rent, well, you might expect that there will be a problem with that.
Right.
Now, a bunch of people would come up with different policy solutions for that. I'm not claiming to have a brilliant idea as far as that goes, but it's a greater conversation we need to have.
Right. Raising the awareness that, yes, there's an issue. These are some of the dynamics involved in the issue. It's deeper than just this one surface level point. And if we know more about it, then we can make our decisions about what we want to do about it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned a family that you knew that had gone through eviction. It's not far away from you.
Yes.
Not you only as an individual, but from all of us, because even if it's our clients might experience it, but family members have hardships. Anything, medical bills, car repairs, any small thing can send one person in that direction.
That's right. Perhaps their income might not be what we want it to be to pay rent or whatever, but sometimes our assets, which can include our family, our friends, the community agencies, our education, our transportation, looking at the full range of assets.
Well, and maybe mom can't help out with any rent money, but maybe she can help with some babysitting.
Right.
And that's one thing about the families who do survive eviction is they're very resilient, very creative, and as from the social services side of things, we can get creative with the clients and come up with unique opportunities for them to not only survive the moment if they're facing eviction, but then think about building up assets as well down the road, especially when it comes to things like home ownership.
Right. And that's a whole other issue that we'd love
to have a talk about. That is a whole other issue, yes.
Yes.
I would encourage anybody to keep digging further on the issue, because we do know as a large driver of poverty that we can find great solutions to address eviction as an issue and hopefully give families the leg up that they need.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us on this incredibly important issue, and hope to be able to talk again.
Thank you very much for having me today.
You're welcome.